The worst part about freezing to death is how peaceful it feels right before your body gives up. I didn't know if that was medically accurate or just something my exhausted brain invented to stay calm while I lay face down in 3 feet of snow somewhere deep in the Alaskan wilderness. But in that moment, it felt true. The cold had stopped hurting 20 minutes earlier. My fingers were numb. My lips barely worked. Even breathing felt distant, like my lungs belonged to someone else. Snowflakes landed softly against my eyelashes while the storm swallowed the world around me inch by inch. I could still hear the sound of the snowmobile engine fading away in the distance. Ethan never looked back. That was the part one couldn't stop replaying. Not the crash. Not the screaming wind. Not the sharp pain in my shoulder after I hit the ice. Just him. The way he stared at me after the snowmobile tipped sideways near the ridge. The panic in his eyes. The calculation. Claire, listen to me. He'd shouted over the storm, kneeling beside me for maybe 10 seconds before glancing toward the tree line like something was chasing him. I have to go get help. I grabbed his jacket with frozen fingers. Don't leave me. My voice cracked so badly I barely recognized it. Snow blew between us like smoke. I'll come back, he promised. But promises sound different when someone's already halfway gone. Then he pulled away, climbed back onto the snowmobile, and disappeared into the white storm without me. At first I tried to move. I really did. I dug my elbows into the snow and dragged myself maybe 2 feet before the pain exploded through my leg hard enough to make me cry out. My right boot had twisted underneath me during the crash. I couldn't put weight on it. The wind kept getting stronger, sharp enough to cut through every layer I wore. My parka was soaked. My gloves were stiff with ice. I kept telling myself Ethan would come back in 10 minutes. Then 30. Then an hour. Eventually, time stopped meaning anything. The sky darkened early the way it always does in Alaska during winter. Gray clouds pressed low over the mountains. Snow covered the tracks we'd left behind until it looked like no one had ever been there at all. I remember thinking how easy it would be to disappear here. No roads. No cabins. Just endless white wilderness stretching for miles in every direction. The kind of place people vanished in documentaries. My body started shaking violently. Then suddenly it didn't. That terrified me more than the storm. Because I knew enough from working emergency shifts at the clinic to understand what it meant when hypothermia stopped feeling painful. It meant my body was losing the fight. I rolled onto my back slowly and stared at the falling snow. Everything looked strangely beautiful. Quiet. Peaceful. Like the world had already accepted I wasn't going home. Then I heard it. Crunch. Slow. Heavy. Close. My eyes snapped toward the trees instantly. Another crunch followed. Massive footsteps pressing through deep snow somewhere beyond the storm. My pulse stumbled painfully against my ribs. At first I thought it was Ethan returning. Then I saw the shape moving between the pines. Too large. Too wide. The dark figure stepped forward through the blowing snow, and my entire body locked in fear. A bear. Huge. Brown fur, dusted white with frost. Its shoulders looked taller than the hood of Ethan's snowmobile. Steam curled from its mouth as it breathed into the frozen air. I stopped breathing completely. Every survival article I'd ever read flashed through my mind at once. Don't run. Don't scream. Don't make sudden movements. Not that I could have moved anyway. The bear stared directly at me from maybe 20 feet away. Dark eyes. Calm eyes. Not curious. Not aggressive. Just watching. The wind howled louder around us while snow swirled between the trees. My heart beat so hard I thought it might kill me before the cold did. Please, I whispered weakly, though I wasn't even sure who I was begging anymore. The bear took one slow step closer. Then another. Snow cracked beneath its weight. I could smell wet fur and cold earth beneath the storm now. Tears burned the corners of my eyes. I thought this was it. Alone. Frozen. Forgotten by the man who claimed he loved me. And about to die beside a wild animal in the middle of nowhere. But the bear didn't lunge. Didn't roar. Instead, it lowered itself into the snow beside me with a deep rumble in its chest. Massive body blocking the wind like a living wall. Warmth touched my frozen arm for the first time in hours. And somewhere in the distance beyond the storm, I heard something else moving through the trees. I do not know how long I stared at that bear before I realized something impossible. It was trying to keep me alive. The wind screamed across the mountain hard enough to shake the trees, but almost none of it touched me anymore. The bear had positioned itself between my body and the storm with eerie precision, its massive frame blocking the worst of the freezing air. Heat rolled from its thick fur in slow waves. Real heat. Enough that I could finally feel my fingers again, though the pain that came with it made tears sting my eyes. My whole body trembled violently. The bear watched me without moving. Dark eyes. Steady eyes. Every instinct I had still screamed that I should be terrified, but fear was becoming difficult to separate from exhaustion. My eyelids kept slipping closed. "You are not real," I whispered weakly through chattering teeth. The bear exhaled slowly, warm breath curling into the frozen air between us. I laughed once, a broken little sound that barely survived the storm. Maybe hypothermia had finally pushed my brain over the edge. Maybe this was how people died out here. Hallucinations. Comfort before the dark. Somewhere behind the trees, another sound echoed through the wilderness. A sharp cry carried by the wind. The bear's ears twitched instantly. Its head lifted. The low rumble in its chest deepened into something almost thunderous. I froze. Another cry answered from farther away. Wolves. I had heard them once before during a camping trip years ago. That same haunting sound that made the woods feel suddenly ancient and dangerous. My pulse stumbled painfully. The bear rose to its full height beside me, and for the first time I truly understood how enormous it was. Snow slid from its back as it stood. Every movement was calm, controlled, powerful. The animal stared into the storm while the distant cries grew closer. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my ankle so sharply I nearly blacked out. "Please do not leave," I whispered before I could stop myself. I do not know why I said it. Maybe because Ethan already had. Maybe because the idea of being alone again felt worse than dying. The bear glanced back at me, just once. Then it stepped forward into the blowing snow beyond the trees. My stomach dropped instantly. "No," I breathed. Wind rushed into the space where its warmth had been. The cold hit me like ice water. I curled my numb fingers into the snow, trying not to panic while shadows shifted between the pines ahead. For several seconds, all I could hear was the storm. Then came the sound. Deep. Sharp. Not a roar exactly. More like a warning that vibrated through the ground beneath me. Silence followed. Heavy silence. A moment later, the distant cries disappeared completely. I stopped breathing as the huge shape emerged from the trees again. Snow clung to its fur. The bear walked back toward me slowly before lowering itself beside me once more like nothing had happened at all. My throat tightened unexpectedly. "You came back," I whispered. The words cracked apart in the freezing air. The bear simply blinked at me. I do not know when I fell asleep after that. One moment I was staring at snowflakes drifting through the darkness above us. The next, I woke to dim gray light filtering through pine branches overhead. Morning. The storm had weakened sometime during the night. My body felt heavy and strange, like every bone inside me had been replaced with stone. For one horrible second, I thought the bear had disappeared. Then I saw it lying a few feet away, half covered in snow, still watching the woods around us. Guarding. My chest tightened again. The bear stood slowly when it noticed I was awake. It looked toward the trees, then back at me. Once. Twice. Almost expectant. "What?" I whispered hoarsely. The animal turned and started walking away through the snow before stopping several yards ahead. It looked back again, waiting. Confusion flickered through my exhausted brain. The bear wanted me to follow it. "You have got to be kidding me," I muttered under my breath. Pain exploded through my ankle. The second I tried to stand, but staying where I was meant freezing to death eventually. I looked at the endless wilderness around me, then at the giant bear waiting silently between the trees. Every survival instinct told me following a wild animal deeper into the Alaskan wilderness was insane. But the truth settled quietly into my chest as I stared at it. The only thing that had not abandoned me out here was the bear. Following the bear through the Alaskan wilderness should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt strangely inevitable. Every step sent sharp pain through my ankle, but standing still meant dying slowly in the snow. And somehow the massive animal waiting ahead of me felt safer than the memory of Ethan disappearing into the storm. The bear moved carefully through the trees, never too far ahead. Every 20 or 30 feet, it stopped and looked back at me as if checking whether I was still there. I limped after it through knee-deep snow while freezing wind scraped against my face hard enough to make my eyes water. My legs shook constantly from exhaustion. More than once I nearly collapsed. Every time I slowed too much, the bear stopped moving entirely and waited in silence. You know this is insane, right? I whispered hoarsely at one point, gripping a pine tree to steady myself. White breath drifted from my mouth in uneven bursts. The bear stared back at me with those dark, unreadable eyes. I laughed weakly under my breath. I am following a grizzly bear into the woods like this is some kind of Disney movie. The animal turned and kept walking. Hours seemed to pass that way. Endless white wilderness. Snow-covered branches. Mountains hidden behind gray clouds. I stopped feeling my fingertips again sometime around noon. Hunger twisted painfully through my stomach, but thirst felt worse. My lips were cracked badly enough that I could taste blood every time I spoke. The bear finally led me into a narrow stretch of rocky terrain where the wind weakened slightly between the cliffs. Ahead, half hidden beneath snow-covered stone, was the dark opening of a cave. I stopped immediately. The bear disappeared inside without hesitation. My pulse quickened. Oh, no, I muttered softly. Absolutely not. Every horror story I had ever heard suddenly came rushing back into my brain at once. But another sharp gust of freezing wind tore through my soaked jacket, and reality settled in quickly. Outside, the temperature had to be close to 10 below zero by now. Inside the cave, there was at least shelter. I swallowed hard before limping toward the entrance. The cave smelled like pine, wet earth, and animal fur. Surprisingly clean. Not abandoned exactly, but lived in. The bear stood deeper inside, watching me carefully while soft daylight filtered through cracks in the stone overhead. I stayed near the entrance at first, my entire body tense. Okay, I whispered shakily. We are sharing the cave. That is happening. The bear lowered itself onto the ground slowly, huge paws stretching across the stone floor. Calm, relaxed, like it had already decided I belonged there. My body gave out the second I stopped moving. I slid down against the cave wall with a painful gasp and wrapped my arms around myself, shivering uncontrollably. The adrenaline keeping me upright for the past several hours finally disappeared, leaving nothing but exhaustion behind. My eyes burned suddenly. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. Not because of the cold, because of Ethan. I hated that part most. Hated that after everything, some stupid broken part of me still wanted to believe he had not meant to leave me out there. Maybe he panicked. Maybe he got lost. Maybe he really had gone for help. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Ethan had looked at me lying injured in the snow and decided saving himself mattered more. The cave blurred through tears. I really loved him. I whispered quietly into the silence. The bear watched me from across the cave without moving. 5 years. My voice cracked badly. 5 years, and he left me there like I was nothing. The animal blinked slowly. Outside, wind moved softly through the trees again. I wiped my face angrily with numb fingers. This is pathetic, I muttered. I am crying in front of a bear now. A strange sound rumbled softly from the animal's chest. Not aggressive, almost gentle somehow. My breathing slowed little by little while exhaustion dragged heavily at my body. I do not remember deciding to move closer to it. I only remember the cold becoming unbearable again. The bear's thick fur looked impossibly warm in the dim light of the cave. My survival instincts argued with each other for nearly a full minute before exhaustion finally won. Slowly, carefully, I shifted across the cave floor until I sat a few feet away from the animal's side. The heat coming from its body hit me instantly. Real warmth. My eyes closed before I could stop them. Thank you, I whispered weakly. The bear did not move away. For the first time since Ethan disappeared into the storm, I felt something dangerous begin to return inside my chest. Not safety exactly. Something smaller. Fragile. Hope. Then suddenly the bear's head lifted sharply toward the cave entrance, and the low rumble in its chest returned. The change in the bear happened instantly. 1 second it was resting beside me in complete stillness. The next, every muscle in its massive body tightened beneath the thick brown fur like a storm rolling beneath the surface of the earth. Its ears lifted sharply toward the cave entrance. The low rumble in its chest deepened. I froze where I sat. Outside, the wind had weakened enough that I could hear the forest again. Snow sliding from branches. Distant trees creaking in the cold. Then came the sound that changed everything. Voices. Human voices somewhere far beyond the cave. My heart jumped painfully into my throat. Help! I whispered automatically before I could stop myself. The word barely left my lips. The bear turned its head toward me immediately. Those dark eyes locked onto mine with unsettling intensity. Another voice echoed faintly through the trees outside. Male. Too far away to understand clearly. Relief crashed through me so hard I nearly cried again. Someone was looking for me. They had to be. Ethan must have reached town after all. Maybe rescue teams were searching the mountains right now. Maybe this nightmare was finally ending. I struggled to push myself upright against the cave wall, wincing as pain shot through my ankle again. Hey, I called weakly. Toward the entrance. I am here. The bear stood immediately. Not aggressive. Fast. Purposeful. In 2 enormous steps it moved between me and the mouth of the cave, blocking the opening completely. My breath caught. What are you doing? I whispered. The animal let out another low sound deep in its chest while staring into the trees outside. Protective. Warning. The voices faded again beneath the wind. I swallowed hard and looked at the huge shape standing guard in front of me. Suddenly, I remembered something that made my stomach tighten. Bears did not protect people. They protected territory. Food. Cubs. But not strangers. Not injured women abandoned in the wilderness. Nothing about this made sense anymore. The bear remained perfectly still for nearly a full minute before slowly relaxing again. Whatever it had heard outside apparently no longer felt like a threat. I released a shaky breath I had not realized I was holding. You really think something out there is worse than you? I whispered softly. The bear glanced back at me once before settling near the cave entrance again. Night came quickly after that. The temperature dropped harder once the sunlight disappeared behind the mountains, and freezing wind pushed through the trees outside in long hollow waves. I could barely feel my feet anymore despite sitting close to the bear's warmth. Hunger twisted painfully through my stomach every few minutes now. I had not eaten since early that morning before Ethan convinced me the snowmobile trip would be fun. The memory made bitterness rise sharply in my chest again. Ethan had always loved adventure right up until things became difficult. I should have seen it earlier. The missed calls he ignored from his mother because she worried too much. The way he disappeared emotionally anytime life stopped revolving around him. The small selfish things I kept forgiving because I loved him. Out here in the freezing dark, every red flag suddenly looked enormous. I stared at the cave ceiling while exhaustion pulled at my body again. You know the sad part? I whispered quietly after a while. I still keep hoping he comes back. The bear shifted slightly beside me. That is embarrassing, honestly. My voice cracked into a weak laugh. I mean, he left me to die. The words hung heavily in the darkness after I said them out loud, because hearing them made them real in a way my mind had been avoiding all day. Left me to die? Tears burned my eyes again, but I forced them back this time. I was too exhausted to cry anymore. Silence settled around us except for wind outside the cave. Then unexpectedly, the bear moved closer. Slowly, carefully. Its enormous body lowered beside me until thick warm fur pressed gently against my shoulder. I stopped breathing for a second. Heat wrapped around me instantly. Safe. Steady. Alive. My eyes closed before I could stop them. You are literally a wild animal, I murmured weakly. Why are you nicer than people? The bear exhaled softly beside me. I do not remember falling asleep. I only remember the warmth. The strange, impossible comfort of hearing another living creature breathing beside me while the storm raged outside. Then sometime deep in the middle of the night, the bear suddenly jerked upright with a sharp growl that echoed through the cave. My eyes snapped open instantly. Outside, somewhere beyond the trees, headlights moved through the darkness. At first I thought I was dreaming. The lights moved slowly between the trees outside the cave, pale yellow beams cutting through the darkness like ghosts drifting across the snow. My heart slammed painfully against my ribs. Rescue teams. It had to be rescue teams. Hey, I pushed myself upright too fast and nearly collapsed from the pain in my ankle. I am here. The bear's growl deepened immediately. Not loud. Low. Warning. Its massive body remained planted between me and the cave entrance while the distant lights flickered through the forest. Relief tangled with confusion inside my chest. What is wrong with you? I whispered breathlessly. Those are people. The bear did not move. Wind pushed snow through the trees outside in silver waves while the lights slowly drifted closer. I could hear voices now. Male voices. One of them sounded painfully familiar. Ethan. My entire body went still. I scrambled toward the cave entrance despite the pain, shooting through my leg. Ethan. I shouted. The name echoed weakly against the cliffs outside. The lights stopped moving instantly. Silence swallowed the forest. Then finally, I heard his voice clearly through the wind. Claire. Relief exploded through me, so suddenly it hurt. Tears blurred my vision. I am here. I cried. I am in the cave. For one impossible second, everything inside me softened. He came back. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe fear had made him panic. Maybe he really had gone for help like he promised. The bear shifted sharply in front of me again, muscles tightening beneath its fur. Another voice spoke outside. Lower. Older. Wait, the stranger said. Something is in there. Flashlights swept across the cave entrance suddenly. The second the beam touched the bear, chaos erupted outside. Men shouted. Snow crunched beneath fast-moving boots. The bear let out a deep warning sound that vibrated through the cave walls. No, I yelled instinctively. My voice cracked harshly through the darkness. Do not hurt it. Silence followed. Complete silence except for wind. Then Ethan's voice came again, shaky this time. Claire, are you alone in there? I stared at the back of the bear standing protectively between me and the entrance. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Alone. The word felt strange now. No. I whispered softly before answering louder. There is a bear. One of the men outside muttered something under his breath. Another flashlight beam moved across the snow. Ethan spoke again after several long seconds. Claire, you need to move away from it slowly, okay? We will get you out. The bear remained completely still. Calm. Watching. I looked at the huge animal standing only a few feet away from me, and suddenly something inside my chest twisted painfully. Because the truth settled there quietly all at once. Ethan had left me. This bear had not. The realization hit harder than the cold ever did. Claire. Ethan sounded impatient now. Nervous. Come on. I swallowed hard. It is not hurting me. Silence again. Then one of the strangers outside laughed nervously. Lady, that thing is 800 pounds. I know, I whispered. My eyes stayed fixed. On the bear. But it stayed. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Outside, the wind howled softly through the trees again. Ethan exhaled sharply somewhere beyond the flashlight beams. Claire, listen to me. You are confused right now because of hypothermia. Just move away from the animal. Confused. Something bitter curled quietly inside my chest at the word. I remembered begging him not to leave me. Remembered watching the snowmobile disappear into the storm while I lay injured in the freezing dark. The bear slowly glanced back at me then. Just once. Those dark eyes met mine in the dim light of the cave, calm and unreadable. My breathing caught. I did not understand why this animal had protected me. None of it made sense. But somewhere over the past 24 hours, the fear inside me had changed into something else. Trust. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt heartbreakingly simple. The bear turned back toward the cave entrance and let out another low rumble as the men outside shifted nervously in the snow. Claire. Ethan called again, voice tightening. Please. I closed my eyes briefly. When I opened them again, the bear was still standing there between me and the world outside like a living wall against the storm. And for the first time since the rescue lights appeared in the trees, one impossible, terrifying thought crossed my mind. I was not sure I wanted to leave it behind. The strangest part was not that I trusted the bear. It was how quickly I stopped trusting Ethan. Snow drifted through the cave entrance in soft spirals while the rescue team waited outside with their flashlights pointed carefully toward the ground now. Nobody wanted to provoke the massive animal standing between us. I could hear nervous whispers beyond the trees. Radios crackling, boots shifting in deep snow. But inside the cave, everything felt strangely still. The bear had not moved from its place near the entrance. Ethan finally stepped closer into view, his flashlight illuminating part of his face beneath the hood of his winter jacket. He looked exhausted, pale. His dark hair was damp with snow. Claire, he said softly this time. Please come out. I stared at him without answering right away. 24 hours ago, seeing him would have felt like safety. Home. Now all I could think about was the sound of the snowmobile disappearing while I begged him not to leave me behind. Ethan swallowed hard when I stayed silent. I had to go for help, he said quickly, like he could already hear the accusation forming in my head. The storm was getting worse, and I thought if I stayed out there with you, we both would have died. I looked down at my injured ankle wrapped awkwardly in strips of torn fabric from my sweater, then at the bear beside me. But you still left. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Ethan's expression tightened immediately. Claire, do not do this right now. The words hit something raw inside me. Do not do this. Like my pain was inconvenient. Like surviving what happened somehow made me dramatic. The rescue team exchanged uncomfortable glances outside the cave. Ethan stepped forward carefully through the snow. I came back, okay, he snapped softly. I drove 14 miles through a blizzard to get help for you. 14 miles. Hearing the number made my chest ache unexpectedly, because it meant he had not gotten lost. He had not crashed. He had made a choice. Every mile away from me had been deliberate. The bear suddenly let out a low warning sound. Ethan stopped immediately. Jesus, one of the rescuers muttered under his breath outside. Ethan stared at the animal with visible fear now. Claire, that thing is dangerous. I looked at the huge shape standing protectively beside me. Then back at Ethan. It kept me alive. Silence swallowed the cave after that. Ethan laughed once in disbelief. Sharp. Nervous. It is a wild animal. And you left me there to freeze. My voice cracked this time despite trying to hold it steady. The truth echoed heavily against the stone walls. Ethan's face hardened instantly. That is not fair. Something inside me finally broke at those words. Fair. I almost laughed. Instead, tears burned my eyes again from sheer exhaustion. I begged you not to go, I whispered. I could not even stand. Ethan dragged a hand across his face angrily. What was I supposed to do, Claire? Sit there and die with you. The cave went completely silent. Even the wind outside seemed to disappear for one terrible second. Because there it was. The truth neither of us wanted to say out loud until now. He chose himself. Maybe most people would have. Maybe survival made selfishness easy. But hearing it still felt like someone pressing ice directly against my heart. The bear shifted closer beside me again, warm fur brushing against my shoulder. Ethan noticed the movement immediately. His expression changed from frustration to something almost offended. You cannot seriously trust that thing more than me. I stared at him for a very long moment before answering quietly. It stayed. Ethan looked like I had slapped him. Snow blew softly through the cave entrance between us while the rescue team avoided eye contact entirely now. One of the older men finally stepped forward carefully. Ma'am, he said gently, we need to get you out of the cold before your condition gets worse. I knew he was right. My body felt weak enough that even breathing hurt now. But as I looked at the bear beside me, panic curled unexpectedly in my chest. Leaving suddenly felt wrong. The bear turned its massive head toward me slowly, dark eyes calm and unreadable as always. I swallowed hard. I do not even know why you helped me. I whispered softly under my breath. The animal blinked once. Then outside somewhere deeper in the forest, another sound echoed faintly through the mountains. A distant howl carried through the snow. The bear's ears lifted instantly, and for the first time since the rescue team arrived, it stepped away from me and turned back toward the wilderness. The moment the bear turned toward the forest, something inside me panicked. It did not make sense. 24 hours ago, I would have done anything to escape a wild animal in the middle of nowhere. Now watching it slowly step away from the cave felt unbearable in a way I could not explain. Snow crunched softly beneath its massive paws as it moved toward the darkness between the trees. The rescue team immediately relaxed behind me. I heard one of the men exhale hard under his breath. Another muttered. Finally, Ethan stepped closer to the cave entrance carefully, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. Claire, he said gently this time. Come on, let us get you home. Home. The word felt strangely distant now. I stared at the bear disappearing slowly into the storm-covered forest while cold air rushed through the cave entrance where its warmth used to be. It stopped once near the trees and looked back at me. Just once. My chest tightened painfully. Then it vanished into the dark. Silence settled heavily around the cave after that. One of the rescuers moved forward first, offering me a thick thermal blanket. You are lucky to be alive, he said quietly while wrapping it around my shoulders. I almost answered automatically. Instead, I found myself staring toward the woods again. Lucky. That was one word for it. Ethan crouched beside me carefully. Can you stand? I nodded weakly, even though my entire body ached from exhaustion. The second I tried to put weight on my ankle, pain shot through my leg hard enough to blur my vision. Ethan caught my arm before I fell. I flinched instinctively. The movement was small, barely noticeable, But I saw the expression on his face change immediately when I pulled away from his touch. Hurt, shocked, guilt. Claire, he whispered. I could not look at him. The rescuers helped me out of the cave slowly while snow drifted around us beneath the pale glow of the flashlights. Outside, the mountains stretched endlessly beneath the dark sky. Beautiful, empty, wild. I searched the trees one last time without meaning to. No sign of the bear remained anywhere. Only untouched snow beneath the pines. Ethan guided me carefully toward one of the snow vehicles parked near the ridge. The storm is supposed to get worse again in a few hours, one of the rescuers explained while securing supplies in the back. We need to move now. I nodded faintly, but my attention kept drifting back toward the forest. Ethan noticed. Claire, he said quietly beside me. It was just an animal. The words settled heavily inside my chest. Just an animal. I thought about the warmth of its fur pressed against me while I shook from hypothermia. The way it blocked. The wind with its body. The way it waited every time I struggled to walk. The way it stayed. I looked at Ethan slowly. You keep saying that like it matters. His jaw tightened instantly. You are acting like I abandoned you on purpose. I stared at him in disbelief. Snow swirled softly between us. You did. The rescuers exchanged another uncomfortable glance nearby. Ethan dragged a hand through his damp hair, frustration flashing across his face again. I went for help because there was no other option. There was another option, I whispered. You could have stayed. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Because deep down he knew I was right. The silence between us stretched painfully while wind moved through the mountains around us. Finally, Ethan looked away first. You do not understand what it felt like, he said quietly. Watching you lying there in the snow like that, his voice cracked slightly. I was scared. For the first time since he returned, I believed him completely. He had been scared. Terrified probably. But fear did not erase what he chose to do next. The rescuers finished preparing the vehicle quickly after that. One of them handed Ethan a radio while another helped me climb carefully into the passenger seat beneath layers of blankets. My body felt heavy now. Exhaustion pressed against my bones hard enough that staying awake became difficult. The engine started with a low rumble beneath us. Headlights cut across the endless snow ahead. Ethan climbed into the driver's seat beside me and gripped the wheel tightly. We are getting out of here, he said softly. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes briefly. Then suddenly every hair on my arms lifted. A feeling. Instinct. Something made me look back toward the forest one last time. Far beyond the trees, barely visible beneath the blowing snow, stood a massive dark shape watching the vehicle from the ridge above us. Still, silent, waiting. The bear followed us. Not close enough for the rescuers to notice at first. But every time the vehicle hit a curve through the mountain trail, I caught glimpses of a massive shadow moving silently between the trees beyond the headlights. Watching, keeping pace. Snow whipped across the windshield while the engine growled beneath us. One of the rescuers drove ahead on another snowmobile, cutting a narrow path through the deep drifts while Ethan kept both hands locked tightly on the wheel beside me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The silence inside the vehicle felt heavier than the storm outside. I sat curled beneath 3 thermal blankets, staring out the side window at the endless white forest sliding past us. Every few minutes my eyes drifted back toward the dark tree line automatically, looking for him. The realization should have embarrassed me. Instead, it terrified me how natural it felt. You should try to sleep, Ethan said quietly after a while. His voice sounded careful now, fragile, like he was afraid every word might push me farther away. I kept staring out the window. I am fine. It was a lie. My body still shook from exhaustion every few minutes, and my ankle burned with sharp throbbing pain each time the vehicle hit uneven ice beneath the snow. But the deeper ache sat somewhere else entirely. Ethan exhaled softly beside me. Claire, I know you are angry. Angry. The word almost made me laugh. What I felt went deeper than anger now. Something colder. Sadder. You keep talking like this was an argument, I whispered. It was survival. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter. I did survive. I finally turned to look at him. Snowlight reflected faintly across his face, making him look older somehow. More tired. That is exactly the point. The words settled heavily between us after that. Ethan swallowed hard and looked back toward the trail ahead. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he stayed silent. Outside, the storm strengthened again. Wind slammed against the sides of the vehicle hard enough to shake it slightly, while snow swallowed everything beyond the headlights into endless darkness. Then suddenly the rescue snowmobile ahead stopped moving. Ethan frowned instantly and slowed beside them. One of the rescuers jumped off first, flashlights sweeping nervously across the snow. "What happened?" Ethan called through the cracked window. The older rescuer crouched low near the trail, staring at something on the ground. "Tracks," he muttered. My pulse quickened instantly. Ethan stepped out into the storm, while icy wind rushed briefly into the vehicle. I leaned forward carefully, heart pounding harder now. Massive paw prints crossed directly over the trail ahead. Fresh. Huge. Even beneath the blowing snow, they were unmistakable. One of the rescuers looked pale. "That bear has been following us for miles." Ethan looked back toward the dark forest immediately. "Maybe it is tracking the vehicle." But even he did not sound convinced. Because deep down, we both knew the truth. It was tracking me. The thought should have filled me with fear. Instead, warmth spread strangely through my chest despite the cold. One of the younger rescuers laughed nervously. "I do not get it. Why would a grizzly protect somebody?" Nobody answered him. Wind howled through the mountains around us while snow drifted across the enormous tracks. Ethan climbed back into the driver's seat quickly after that, visibly unsettled now. "We are leaving," he said firmly. The vehicle started moving again, faster this time. I looked back through the rear window one last time as the forest disappeared behind us. For several seconds there was nothing except darkness and snow. Then two dark shapes appeared briefly between the trees far behind the trail. Eyes. Watching us leave. My breath caught painfully in my chest. Ethan noticed my expression immediately. "Do not," he said quietly. "Do not get attached to this thing, Claire." I looked down at my trembling hands beneath the blanket. Too late. Ethan stared at me like he did not recognize me anymore. Maybe he did not. Honestly, I barely recognized myself either. The woman who climbed onto that snowmobile 2 days ago would have laughed at this entire situation. But that woman had still believed love meant safety. The mountains had taught me otherwise. We drove another 20 minutes before the lights of the ranger station finally appeared through the storm ahead. Warm yellow windows glowing against the snow like something out of another life. Relief washed visibly across the rescuers. Outside, Ethan slowed the vehicle carefully toward the building. But the second we pulled into the clearing, every light inside the station suddenly went dark at once. My stomach dropped instantly. Then somewhere beyond the tree line behind us, a deep growl echoed through the storm. Everything inside me went cold the second the ranger station lights disappeared. One moment warm yellow light glowed through the snowstorm ahead like salvation. The next, darkness swallowed the building completely. Ethan slammed the brakes instinctively. The vehicle skidded slightly on the ice before stopping hard in the clearing. Wind screamed across the mountain pass while snow hammered against the windshield. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed for a second. Then that deep growl echoed again from somewhere beyond the tree line behind us. Low, powerful, close. One of the rescuers outside swore under his breath. Flashlights immediately swept toward the woods. Ethan grabbed the radio beside him. "Station 7, come in." Static answered him. My pulse pounded painfully against my ribs. "Why did the lights go out?" I whispered. Nobody answered. The older rescuer climbed off his snowmobile slowly, flashlight trembling slightly in his gloved hand. "Backup generator should have kicked on already," he muttered. Another growl rolled through the darkness beyond the trees. Closer this time. The younger rescuer turned pale instantly. "That thing followed us all the way here." Ethan looked toward the forest with visible fear now. "Get inside," he snapped toward the team. "Now." Everything happened quickly after that. The rescuers moved toward the station entrance through knee-deep snow while Ethan helped me carefully out of the vehicle. My injured ankle nearly gave out immediately beneath me, but adrenaline pushed me forward anyway. The ranger station stood maybe 30 yards away through the storm. Dark windows. Silent. Wrong. Wind rattled the metal roof overhead while snow drifted across the porch steps. One of the rescuers reached the door first and shoved it open hard. Warm air rushed out instantly. Light flickered inside. "Generator is working," he called back in confusion. Ethan practically dragged me through the doorway a second later. The warmth hit my frozen skin painfully fast. My entire body shook uncontrollably beneath the blankets now. Inside, the station looked abandoned at first glance. Half-empty coffee mugs sat scattered across a table near the radio equipment. A jacket hung over one of the chairs. Everything looked normal except for one terrifying detail. Nobody was there. "Hello," the older rescuer called sharply. Silence answered him. Wind moaned softly outside the building while the storm rattled the windows. Ethan locked the front door immediately behind us. "Where did everybody go?" one of the younger men whispered. Nobody knew. Static crackled loudly from the radios on the wall before suddenly cutting out again. My skin prickled uneasily. Something about the station felt wrong in a way I could not explain. Not dangerous exactly. Just empty in the unnatural way places become after people leave suddenly. Then I noticed the tracks. Wet boot prints stretched across the floor near the back exit. Fresh. Leading outside again. Ethan followed my stare instantly. "They left," he muttered. The older rescuer frowned deeply. Why would they abandon the station during a storm? Nobody answered because another sound interrupted him. Heavy footsteps outside. Slow. Deliberate. Every person inside the station froze instantly. My heart nearly stopped. The footsteps circled somewhere beyond the walls beneath the howl of the wind. Snow crunched softly beneath enormous weight. One of the rescuers reached nervously toward the emergency flare gun mounted near the door. "Do not," I said immediately. My voice came out sharper than I expected. Everyone turned toward me. I stared toward the frost-covered windows where shadows shifted faintly beyond the glass. "It is not trying to hurt us." Ethan looked at me like I had completely lost my mind. "Claire, it could have killed me 20 times already," I whispered. It did not. Silence settled heavily over the room again. Then slowly, almost impossibly, the shadow outside moved past the front window. Massive. Familiar. My chest tightened instantly. The bear stopped directly outside the station entrance. Even through the blowing snow, I could see its dark shape standing